Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 45th episode of In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. This is Keith Wojcicki, Managing Director for Kroll Cyber Risk. This week, we are joined by George Glass, Dave Truman, Ryan Hicks, Mukesh Nagar, Ethan Elfrey, and of course, our expert, Sarah Becker from our cyber threat intel team. So today is April 8th, 2024, and we'll be covering the most recent trends our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. Let's talk news you can use for April 8th, 2024. So best practices against password spray attacks. So Cisco have published a guide on the recommendations they urge administrators to consider to protect against password spray attacks aimed at remote access VPNs. Although the guide focuses on configuration for a Cisco device, the guidance and principles could also be applied to other VPN appliances. The password spray attacks continue to provide initial access to threat actors, particularly against accounts which does not have multi-factor authentication enabled. So we do tell you to make sure that you get MFA enabled as soon as possible. This is all we have for the news you can use today. So if you have any questions or concerns, please connect with the Kroll team at cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. Now let's get into today's briefing. Today we cover the following trends our team is concentrating on: SMS phishing campaign, Linux privilege escalation, a nation state actor utilizing a bypass, API bypass, malware spotlight, KTA 107. We're going to visit that again. And of course, our in-house expert, Sarah Becker, discusses the Ransomware Roundup. So with that, George, I think we've been talking about phishing every day, for the last, 7 years probably. But today we're going to emphasize an SMS campaign. We nearly saw half of our cases in Q4 of 2023 using phishing for initial access, which to me is completely outrageous. But can you tell us what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure, Keith. Thank you very much. This is a bit of a roundup. As you say, we've been talking about phishing a lot. In Q4, 47% of our incidents were phishing related or use phishing for initial access, and a lot of those obviously lead into the business email compromise group of cases that we work. This roundup is more of a situational awareness of some of the phishing campaigns that are ongoing. Some of these things, I'm sure people that are watching or viewing from the UK will have actually received last week. We got a few of them. And some of these campaigns, the one that you can see there on the bottom right-hand side, that every phishing campaign leads with an SMS, and Netcraft identified a campaign called Darkula, which targets iPhone messages, iPhone users with iMessage, but it also uses RCS for Android phones, and it can do SMS as well. And we saw a lot of these phishing campaigns deployed last week, specifically targeting now that's a mail delivery service in the UK. We've seen similar things here in the UK for Royal Mail, UPS in the States, and so on and so forth. And again, this is just kind of an informational awareness of some of the technologies that can be very easily and cheaply acquired by adversaries to deploy these campaigns. The Darkula campaign in particular had 20,000 domains to imitate brands across 100 countries, and a lot of these domains are deployed on the fly. A few years ago, maybe you'd see a few domains registered, and they get every kind of ounce of use out of those domains. Phishing campaigns now are very, very quick to live and die. So the SMS that you can see there, the Evril.cloud, there was Evril.top, all sorts of variations of that phishing domain there, and all of which are designed to capture user credentials. Similarly, Intel 471 has released a report on an increase in SMS phishing as well. They saw a significant increase since January 2024. Those campaigns are specifically mimicking corporate software. They observed a number of them imitating Citrix gateway logon pages, which you can also see on the right there. And those campaigns are more specifically designed to target organizations, but the theme remains the same. Users' phones are often not monitored by corporate device policies, those sorts of things, but they are often where users will have their two-factor authentication devices and those sorts of things. And we've talked about that a lot before, especially with QR code phishing, whereby the drive for the threat actors is to get the user away from the corporate, the managed side of the infrastructure onto their personal devices, or rely on the fact that people often reuse passwords. So I think that the main takeaway here is the continued education of users. It's very hard to stop these messages getting through, especially to personal devices. So user education here really is key. Ensuring that users aren't reusing passwords from their personal accounts to their corporate accounts. Again, ensuring MFA is enabled, and just continuing to be aware of these campaigns. We think that this is something that we're going to continue to see in 2024. As I said previously, it's very, very cheap and very easy for these phishing as a service offerings to deploy these phishing campaigns, send a whole bunch of iMessages and texts and those sorts of things, and target a lot of people in a very short amount of time. So yeah, just some takeaways there and a bit of a informational awareness on some SMS phishing that we're seeing over here. But I'll hand back to you, Keith. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. I really appreciate the update. Ryan, I know we have another Linux vulnerability that can grant root access. Can you provide us some details on the research you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So yeah, just to quickly kind of highlight this recent vulnerability affecting the Linux kernel has received a proof of concept and a technical write-up last week, following the vulnerability release earlier this year. So the vulnerability is CV 2024-10.8T6. It's got a CVSS of 7.8, therefore high severity. And it affects as I said, the Linux kernel itself, versions 5.1.4 to 6.6.14. And then according to the founder of the vulnerability, that kind of encompasses, at the very least, Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, and Fedora, but perhaps kind of more distributions affected. The keynote here really is that the vulnerability is a local privilege escalation, so not remote, but the high potential impacts when it's run by an unprivileged user, as you mentioned, Keith, would grant root access to the device. The developer of the proof of concept stated that the exploit had a very high success rate, noting 99.4% success against some versions. So yeah, very high and very trivial to run. As well as it being local, there are also several additional requirements that must be met on a vulnerable device before exploitation can take place, and that includes that NF_tables must be enabled and unprivileged user namespaces are enabled. So I mentioned it being local, therefore kind of prior compromise under the privileges of a user would need to take place, and that really greatly reduces the potential attack surface for exploitation. However, the impact remains high, again, with the potential for root access. An exploitation could also potentially occur via insider threat from within an organization, where a user with standard access to a Linux environment is able to elevate their privileges using this exploit to perform malicious actions. So really this could potentially impact a bit of a smaller subset of environments because it being local. However, we recommend upgrading to the relevant Linux distribution just to ensure the patching for the Linux kernel is taking place, particularly if your environment contains those kind of requirements that I mentioned previously, but also if the impact of an insider threat is a big concern within the environment. Yes, we really recommend to kind of upgrades in those cases. That's all for me. I'll hand back to Keith.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for the overview. Dave, you're seeing new activity with an APT group using admin access to run different scheduled tasks. Can you provide us with some details that you're working on?
Yep. A new campaign from a nation-state APT group, Kroll-Traxxas KTA 038, was detailed by Trend Micro. The actor used a compromised VMware machine to deploy a new malware. Using vmtools.d.exe with injected malicious code, the actor ran 2 batch files via run once scheduled tasks. The first ran a series of common information gathering commands such as ipconfig and whoami. The second used DLL hijacking of a default Windows service to run malicious DLL. The service used for this is the Session-env service, which has a display name of remote desktop configuration. The service will run the session or sesenv.dll, which in turn will open a DLL named tsmsisrv.dll if that DLL is present. This second DLL, however, is often not present. And by placing their own DLL with that name in a system32 directory, the sesenv service will start the malicious DLL when it is restarted. That malicious service DLL then drops another malicious DLL onto the compromised host, which it loads into itself. It then spawns a CMD process and also injects the drop DLL into that. This dropped DLL acts as a backdoor. The backdoor malware that Trend Micro has named UnAPImon attempts to subvert security tools that place DLL hooks to monitor API functionality. It does this by copying the DLLs it wishes to use to a temporary location under new names, and then loading them with the don't resolve DLL references flag set. This provides the malware with a relatively clean memory image of the DLLs and their functions to compare to the ones loaded in the system. If it finds any hooks when comparing, it will copy bytes from the temporarily loaded DLLs over the bytes performing the hook, thus unhooking the DLL. Defense in depth comes into play here because whilst it's hard to detect the malware, the batch files running several information gathering complaints in quick succession and writing DLLs with names associated with DLL hijacking might help in detecting suspicious activity. Thank you. Keith?
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate the overview. Now let's dive into our malware chronicles with Mukesh. Mukesh?
Hello, brilliant. Thank you, Keith. So researchers over at Checkpoint have identified that a cyber espionage group called Kerrang, or as we track them internally as KTA 307, is using a somewhat sophisticated backdoor known as DINODASRAT, or the Linux equivalent, which is DINODASRAT, and it's currently being used to target Linux servers. The malware itself was originally a Windows-centric malware. It's now evolved into a Linux version, which has enhanced the abilities for the threat actor to target a large amount of systems. The current method of initial access still remains uncertain. However, tactics such as phishing, spear phishing, as well as exploitation of vulnerabilities are commonly observed with such malware actors. Once the actor has got an initial foothold within the environment, the malware is deployed along with its advanced techniques to evade detections. These techniques include modifying system binaries, executing paths, and using evasion modules in its latest versions in order to hide its traces. For persistence of this malware, it modifies system startup scripts like systemd and adds additional scripts in the init.d directory of a Linux system, tailoring its approach to specific Linux distribution that it affects or infects, sorry. Additionally, the malware also conducts thorough system reconnaissance and establishes a reverse shell for a direct control and manipulate files and to conceal its presence. So yeah, this is something to keep aware of. The best way to track this sort of malware would be to monitor systemd or the init.d directory for any modifications being made. That's all from me, Keith. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mukesh. Appreciate the overview and the detailed review of everything that's just talked about for the malware. With that, I'd like to welcome Ethan, who is a new practitioner to our weekly webinars and briefings. So Ethan, I know you've been given a deep dive into a major event that took place a few weeks ago about sanctions against the group KTA 107. Love to hear more about that. So we're all yours, Ethan.
Thanks, Keith. Active since at least 2010, group Kroll tracks as KTA 107, also known as APT 31, is a state-sponsored group attributed to China. In March 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of State, and the United Kingdom Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office imposed sanctions on one front company associated with the group and 2 individuals. In January 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice issued an indictment impacting the same front company and 5 individuals, including 2 from the March sanctions. The indictment alleges that these individuals orchestrated a series of cyber attacks targeting a wide range of U.S. entities, including universities, technology companies, government agencies, defense contractors, and political campaigns, to include some of them. The indictment also details the methods employed by the defendants, such as malware deployment, web cell usage, exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities, and email phishing. KTA 107's toolkit includes custom-built malware such as GhostRat, RawDoor, Evil OSX, and DropDoor/Dropcat. The malware is attached to an email through an attachment or a link, and these files serve as a malware dropper, which, upon installation, may initiate a legitimate McAfee antivirus application while installing and activating the DropDoor/Dropcat malware implant. The main TTPs include spear phishing for initial access, booter logon, auto start, execution for escalation, ingress tool transfer for lateral movement, and KTA 017 achieves their main goal of corporate espionage and exfiltration by exfiltrating the data over C2 channels. That's it from me, Keith. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ethan, for that overview, and welcome to the team here. Now to the ransomware expert, of course, Sarah Becker. Sarah, so much always going on. Ransomware is just up and down. I think I heard the name Lockbit again. I feel like this is turning into a housewives of the dark web, but who knows? But Sarah, what do you got going on for us today?
You are right, Keith, and we could start something, the Real Housewives of Ransomware. So Lockbit apparently posted about AlphaB and Black Cat affiliates. So there was a post on their data leak site, as seen in the screenshot on the slide. The post is basically listing that bounty website because U.S. government has issued a bounty on Black Hat affiliates for around, I want to say, 10 million. And on the post, they were just stating that the AlphaB Black Hat affiliates have been hacked. And they're kind of looking for a little bit of a chunk of the reward money, as we're assuming. But as of right now, there is no more of that post listed on the data lake site. So again, this is alleged, not too much of legitimacy to confirm on that, but wanted everyone to be aware. And then for our next story, it's just kind of an overview of ransomware groups now targeting backups. So this is important for organizations because researchers have revealed that certain ransomware groups are targeting victim organization backups while they're conducting the cyber attacks. Out of that, 94% of surveyed organizations reported that the threat actors attempted to compromise their backups during a cyber attack. So backups allow companies to have the ability to be able to recover their data without possibly having to pay ransom to these threat actors. So if an organization is unable to recover any of their data from their backups, it could also allow leverage from the threat actors to possibly demand a higher ransom. So again, there's big importance of the backup data that helps companies, once that data is stolen, that they can restore operations and minimize downtime while investigations into the attack are ongoing. It also helps reduce financial loss. It weakens the threat actors' leverage, which could then lead to maybe a lower ransom demand. So best practices suggest implementing strong access controls and having offline backups that are physically isolated from the primary network. And that is all for me, Keith.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the amazing work and cutting edge intel. And stay tuned for a new channel of the Housewives of Ransomware. Appreciate that. Well, with that, today is the day of the full eclipse in the U.S. I know if you're in the path, take the time and appropriate protection. Enjoy the event for sure, because the next event for the total eclipse in the U.S. won't happen until March 30th, 2033. But when the totality report only across like Alaska. The next eclipse after that for the 48 states is expected to occur in 2044 on August 12th, coming from Montana, North Dakota. So it's the other side of the states. But those in Europe may see a partial eclipse today. The further west you go, it goes from like 10% to about 30%. So take a look at that. So I would like to thank everybody that's taken the time to tune in to Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. We do hope you found this session informative. If you have any follow-up questions about this briefing or any other questions pertaining to cybersecurity, please contact the team at cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. I hope everyone has a wonderful day and hope everyone enjoys the eclipse. Take care.